My name is Risto Uuk. I work at the Future of Life Institute. I lead our AI policy efforts in Europe, in the EU and UK. And in case some people here are not aware of what we are working on, we are a global nonprofit. We work on steering very powerful technology away from extreme harm and toward beneficial outcomes for everybody. And we have been working on advanced AI governance for the last decade, really. So we've been in this game for quite a while. And happy to be here. I want to talk today about three main topics. I want to connect them: physical AI, general purpose AI, and systemic risks. My own specialization is in the area of systemic risks from general purpose AI, and I work on the EU AI Act mostly, and so I'll talk about that. The first thing I want to start with is talking about progress in physical AI and AI in general. If I had the privileges to show slides here on the screen, I don't have that privilege, but if I had, I would show some demos of impressive progress. Like we talked about hype today, we talked about the real benefits, impact that physical AI can pose, but definitely people have seen some impressive demos comparing, for example, if you go back a few years, you can see a robot taking a few steps, falling over, trying again, doing the same, not really very impressive. And then we've seen the Boston Dynamics demos, robots doing backflips, dancing, just amazing things that have gone viral. But on the other hand, we've also seen true hype and fails. I would point people to, for example, OpenAI's work in this space. I don't know if people remember, but OpenAI worked very extensively on robotics. I remember seeing a demo where they showed a robotic hand solving a Rubik's Cube very impressively. I even remember a researcher bringing a teddy bear in front of the robotic arm and showing how it was able to solve the Rubik's Cube regardless of that. That was back in 2019, and in 2021, OpenAI shut down their robotics division, saying that they don't have enough real-world data to make progress in the space. So I would tell us, the first message I would want to kind of make here is forecasting is really hard. Forecasting the progress in physical AI, AI in general, is extremely hard. And we can see that from, for example, the start of AI back in 1950s at Dartmouth College, where researchers thought that they would take a couple of months and basically solve AI. And turned out it was much more difficult, and many AI winters followed. On the other hand, we've also seen some very capable researchers predicting AI advancements let's say they have underestimated how much AI can advance. For example, Yoshua Bengio and Geoffrey Hinton, who are two of the most well-cited researchers in the world, they said that ChatGPT level instruction following and language understanding would be far away. Even when we already had GPT-2 and GPT-3, they were wrong. ChatGPT came much earlier than they thought. Actually, I'm kind of glad to see that I was better at forecasting than these great researchers, because I used GPT-3 and I was quite impressed by that. And so ChatGPT wasn't so surprising to me. But I'm sure on many other things I've been wrong and will be wrong in the future, because forecasting is so hard. Because it's so hard to forecast AI advancements, I would tell us to also consider that perhaps it's very hard to foresee what kind of risks AI could pose. We could be wrong about that. Perhaps AI is more risky than we think, or less risky. Both are possible. So that's why I take it seriously to work on systemic risks from general purpose AI. I think AI could pose very severe risks, and that's why I've written a taxonomy paper with some of my colleagues from MIT Future Tech, for example, and a few other collaborators, where we developed a taxonomy of systemic risk from general purpose AI, and we looked at basically wanting to see what kind of risk categories do academics talk about when they talk about large-scale AI risks, systemic risks, societal level harms, even catastrophic risks. What kind of categories of harm are they talking about? And so we went to look after these risks from academic literature, went through several databases, found over 1,700 documents, academic papers, went through those, screened. We use an eligibility criteria to find the best papers. and eventually found that they were talking about 13 categories of risk the most. And these were control risks, risk to democracy, risk to discrimination, large-scale economic disruptions, environmental harm, fundamental rights violations, governance issues, harms to non-humans, to animals, information risks, irreversible changes, power concentration, security risks, warfare. So a lot of different risks they were talking about. But what kind of examples of these risks might have already manifested in the real world or could be manifesting? We've seen in the media recently, and yesterday that came up a couple of times with some people, anthropic mythos was mentioned as having advanced cyber offense capabilities. And some people point out that, hey, I think actually Anthropic has been hyping the technology a lot. They decided not to release it to the public. They only gave access to a few tech companies. And it's actually a marketing ploy. They just want to show that they have very powerful technologies. Everybody should just invest in them. They are the ones that should solve this issue. I think that's true. There's a lot of marketing behind it. But for example, UKAC, UK AI Security Institute, they independently also tested these models. They had access to it. And they found it was very capable in terms of cybersecurity risks and exploiting vulnerabilities in software and code. So I would take it seriously. Let's see what's going to happen, what kind of results we find out from that, and whether we are able to avoid these cyber incidents. Another example that has been popular in mainstream media, I would call it harmful manipulation example, according to, let's say, the UAX systemic risk categories, is AI-powered children toys. And this is I think, an example where general purpose AI is powering physical AI systems and showing its colors in the real world, and not just through chatbots, say. And some people are very worried about this. I remember, I think there was Amazon's Alexa, where there was an incident where a small child was asking Alexa for ideas for games and what to play. And Alexa recommended her to take a coin and put it in the electric socket. And she thought that was a weird recommendation and asked her mom what to think about that, and luckily nothing happened. But yeah, these kinds of large language models are put in children's toys, increasingly so, and we should. A lot of people are worried about that, and perhaps the technology is not there to be deployed at scale. And final example I want to bring is a loss of control example. It's an early example. It's not per se a physical AI example, but I think it could have implications for physical AI as well. I don't know if people probably have heard of OpenClaw and all these experiments recently. And there was a Meta security researcher who experimented with OpenClaw, and OpenClaw accidentally deleted all her emails. It was not something she wanted, obviously, but it led to these unintended consequences because this technology is hard to control. We don't know always what they will do. So this is, of course, troublesome, negative, worrisome. But what can we do to mitigate these risks? I don't think we should be defeatist. It's up to us. We can make these technologies better. We can improve. So because of that, I also study effective mitigations from systemic risks from general purpose AI. And in one paper, together with Stanford researchers and a few other collaborators, we wanted to ask experts, AI safety experts, democracy experts, cybersecurity experts, we wanted to ask them, what kind of mitigations do you think are most effective to reduce these systemic risks? And we sent out the survey to over 300 experts. We got 76 responses. And I was glad to see that these researchers, they thought that most social technical mitigation measures we identify are very feasible. They're technically feasible. They can be implemented. And they point out in particular a few to be most effective, most promising. One was third-party evaluation. So rather than just trusting Anthropic that their system is safe, you ask independent experts to evaluate it. That was one of the most effective ones, most promising one. Another one was sharing information about incidents. So we have better knowledge about what's happening, what kind of incidents these models can pose. Other ones were whistleblower protections. Probably people remember OpenAI's saga with some contracts that they were basically they were asking their employees not to share any information publicly about any risks that their models could pose. They had quite harsh contracts. And then a few people came out as whistleblowers, showing that, hey, these contracts are unreasonable. And this, I want to end, kind of after these thoughts on mitigation, I want to end with the question that this section is asking, or kind of a hypothesis I think we have, which is governing the ungovernable. And I want to ask, is physical AI, is general purpose AI ungovernable? I don't think so. I think the EU AI Act, for example, governs it decently well, or at least has potential. We can keep working on that and figure out how to govern these systems. So I won't go into detail about the EU AI Act. Happy to do that later if anybody's interested. But the AI Act regulates general purpose AI models. It regulates high-risk AI systems. It also regulates, or at least refers to other regulations that apply to physical AI systems. The machinery directive, for example, and other ones. But I'm in particular interested in when general purpose AI is integrated into physical systems, whether it's robots, toys, whatever other kind of physical systems, what kind of implications might those have for the EU Act? And general purpose AI is defined in a particular way in the EU AI Act, and I won't read the full definition. It's quite lengthy, but the main components of general purpose AI under the EU Act are: one, it's trained on with a lot of data. It displays significant generality. It's capable of doing many different distinct tasks competently. And it can be integrated into a variety of downstream systems and applications, including physical AI systems. That's the definition. And under the EU Act, for general purpose AI providers, there are some obligations. There are obligations for all general purpose AI model providers. They must provide technical documentation. They must show instructions for use for the users. They must comply with the copyright directive and publish a summary about the content used for training. But there are some exceptions. If general purpose AI models are released under open licenses, open source models, then they only need to comply with copyright and publish the training data summary, unless they pose systemic risks, which is what I work on. So if a general purpose AI model is designated under systemic risk threshold, it doesn't matter if it's released as open source or not. There are a bunch of obligations for those providers, including they must conduct model evaluations that we've been talking about. They have to assess and mitigate possible systemic risks, track and report serious incidents, and ensure cybersecurity protections, including the Anthropic Mythos example that we had. And I want to end with a couple of practical tools. Perhaps people here who are interested in general purpose AI models, how they relate to physical systems, or perhaps you know others who build general purpose AI models and they need guidance on how to comply with the EU Act. There are a few tools available. One is the Code of Practice for General Purpose AI that was developed by the EU AI Office together with independent experts, including Yoshua Bengio, the expert that I mentioned earlier. And in this Code of Practice, it's essentially a tool, a guideline for the providers to use to comply with the EU Act. It goes through several steps. It shows at a higher level what kind of methods to use to assess systemic risks, how to mitigate it. So it goes through all that process, and I think it's a really good document. I visited people in the US. Oftentimes, speaking with people in the US, they're relatively skeptical of the EU Act, at least some of them, but the Code of Practice they see quite positively. They think it's a good tool. It was developed not by bureaucrats, but by a lot of experts, so they tend to like it. And another tool I will mention, or set of tools, is from us. We have developed, we have the Artificial Intelligence Act.eu website, and on that website you can access tools like the AI Act Explorer, Compliance Checker, these kind of tools a lot of people use. I just checked, we have thousands of companies have used our Compliance Checker, for example, which is a 10-minute questionnaire that helps you go through, check, first it asks, what kind of AI system are you building, or what kind of AI system are you deploying? And then you answer that, and then you go through step by step, and then you end up with some recommendations. Maybe you should care about the high-risk AI system rules under the EU Act, or the general purpose AI rules, other ones. So that kind of tool has been useful. And the AI Act Explorer, that tool is also useful to understand the EU Act better. It's a complicated document, but you can just search for specific things. Maybe you're interested in systemic risk, maybe you're interested in high-risk AI system, and then you can find specific articles there, and it helps you kind of go through that process. So these kinds of tools I would recommend, and hopefully people are able to figure out the EU Act better and kind of apply it, and don't find it such a big monstrous thing that's like is only harmful and only slows us down. Is actually regulation can be useful. For example, Francesca Rossi from IBM, I think, has said a very useful thing. A lot of people think that these rules, these regulations, they always hurt us, they slow us down, and the first talk mentions some of these things or refer to them. But actually, for example, when you think about traffic lights don't slow us down. They actually make it easier to go faster. Without traffic lights, it's very hard to drive, and it's very dangerous. And so if we develop regulations, governance in a smart way, it can be very useful. Of course, in a bad way, it won't be, but it's up to us. We have ownership, we have agency over this. So let's work together, make the EU Act work well for SMEs, for larger companies, everybody. Thanks so much.
Risto, fantastic.